The Bitcoin ETFs are finally here. After 8 years, the wait is over. But what does that mean for you? What does that mean for Bitcoin? Let's go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right off the bat, this probably is both good for individuals and the wealth creation, and this is probably also good for Bitcoin. This will adopt people to the money of Bitcoin in an easy way, and it will also allow massive inflows into Bitcoin, which is likely to see the individual wealth of these members grow and also see the overall market cap of Bitcoin grow substantially as well. That logically plays into the accessibility of Bitcoin. A lot of people are really comfortable owning stocks and bonds. A lot of people aren't comfortable in the self-custody of setting up a wallet, ensuring that it's secure, but not too secure so that too many people can find it and steal your coins. That accessibility to Bitcoin, the barrier has been drastically decreased. Along with that accessibility is the compliance and the ability for large institutions or other players that otherwise wouldn't be able to hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet or other, now have the ability to do that through these wrappers of the ETF. That provides an easy way for them to just purchase the ETF and then put it as an asset on their balance sheet. Next is security. Just like some of the individuals we talked about earlier, not knowing how to manage their own private keys, you have a significant amount of security increase in the actual custody of the Bitcoin. Generally, the average layman is not good at self-custody of Bitcoin. These large corporate players such as Coinbase Custody now are going to be the ones actually holding those Bitcoins. The odds are that they're not going to lose those private keys. Diversification is a huge benefit of a Bitcoin ETF. If you have a modern day portfolio of stocks, bonds, whatever, gold, there is significant value benefit and returns for adding Bitcoin in that diversified portfolio based on the risk you're willing to accept. So a diversified portfolio with even 1%, but ideally 3 to 6%, has a significantly positive risk-adjusted return potential where it will significantly outperform portfolios without that asset. And then if you're annually or otherwise rebalancing that portfolio, you're able to see significant improvements in that risk-adjusted return. And then finally, tax efficiency. There are some jurisdictions where long-term capital gains are not taxed or taxed at a significantly lower rate. This ETF allows you to take those gains in that more tax-advantaged structure or put it in things such as retirement accounts that otherwise you might not have been able to. All right, that's the good. Let's look at the bad. The first one is you do not actually own your Bitcoin in the Bitcoin ETF. That is probably well understood, but the implications might not be. So because you don't actually own your Bitcoin, the only thing that you can do is sell. And if something shady happens, the potential might be that they don't allow you to sell because they're the ones that actually control it. Not your keys, not your crypto. Because they own your keys, there's counterparty risk to this. This counterparty risk is material. So there's probably 3 or 4 different people along the way that are going to administer the ETF, custody it, and do other things which are holding or touching your money that have some risk attached to them. They're not large risks, but they are something. So if I was really good at self-custodying my own Bitcoin, which I am, I have my own risk to think about, but I have nobody else that's touching my Bitcoin, no other counterparty risk. In this case, you're exposing yourselves to additional counterparties under the assumption that they're going to be very good in what they do. And that's probably accurate, but that is a non-zero risk. The next is fees. These inevitably will have fees associated that will put a drag on your returns. The most likely fees you're going to see are between 0.25% annually and 1.5% annually. So you're going to give up, 0.25 to 1% returns annually of what you would make if you just held your own Bitcoin. That's the cost you're paying for these individuals as counterparties to, conduct this market for you. The next are some of the fringe features you're going to miss out on if you're putting your money into a Bitcoin ETF. For instance, when you're holding your own Bitcoin, you don't have to just sit there and look at it, even though it is pretty. You can actually lend it to somebody. You can use it in decentralized finance. You can do things that actually have the ability to earn you more Bitcoin with a little bit of risk associated with what you want to do. The other thing is there is potential, and the potential is pretty decent, that there's a fork in the future, that there's an airdrop, that there's other things that happen where you normally have the ability to self-custody that fork or airdrop or whatever because you own your own keys, I would bet good money that these ETFs would not, or at least some of them will not support some of those airdrops and some of those fringe forks. That's something to be aware of. Just like we talked about taxes in the good, taxes could also be in the bad column. If you have the ability to own Bitcoin with zero tax, such as some of the countries in the Caribbean and elsewhere, that's probably more beneficial than holding it in this wrapper, which would be taxed like a capital asset, capital gains. So you may want to evaluate what your country's stance on both that commodity of Bitcoin or how it's considered in that country versus the capital gains that you would have on buying and selling that ETF. That could be a good or a bad. And then finally, just like we had talked about, a lot of these things are going to probably result in some sort of difference in pricing, a mispricing from the underlying asset. This could be significantly exacerbated under times of significant volatility or on the weekends and after hours, where the ability of somebody to give them $1 and to have that dollar transferred into the underlying Bitcoin in this instance, there would be a delay or there would be some friction there that results on you not getting the price that you thought you were going to get. For instance, on Friday night at 7 p.m., you want to buy some Bitcoin, you give your money to whomever is going to be purchasing that for you. Bitcoin could skyrocket 20% in that weekend period. That is not unheard of whatsoever. You would not be able to realize that gain of that 20% over that weekend because the ETF was not able to be purchased until Monday morning, as an example. All right, that was the good, the bad. Now we're going to get into the strict dystopian ugly. This has the potential to completely change what Bitcoin is and then pervert the entire system, which could be pretty scary. The first one being the centralization of wealth. Because this was a ground up phenomenon of just people sharing white papers and distributing it at the various lowest levels, this was like one of the only examples in modern history where those retail, individuals were the ones that saw the greatest accumulation and gaining of wealth early on in the adoption process. Usually in the modern day, things are driven top down, and you see the rich intermediaries and companies and organizations seeing a lot of the benefit from it, at least initially, until it's wider adopted. In this case, those individuals are now going to have less power, and that wealth is going to be more and more concentrated in these large organizations, such as BlackRock, Fidelity, etc. Now, some of them are running these ETFs. That's going to be more centralized. That's going to be more growing of that centralization of wealth, because now they're also collecting the fees. Not only are they collecting the Bitcoin because people are giving them money to, they're also collecting fees on top of that, which are going to compound and compound on top of themselves. That has potential to concentrate wealth for the elite even higher. The next ugly is the normalization of custodial solutions. We see that people a lot of the times, when faced with security challenges and issues, sometimes they don't care. Sometimes they're going to go to the solutions. That's the easy button. That has good potential in this case to be the shelling point of this, of the Nash equilibrium, whatever, that people will gravitate towards the thing that's the easiest. When they're managing their portfolio or somebody else is managing it for them, they're going to hit the easy button of Bitcoin ETF. And they're not going to go for that self-custody solution, which some of them are getting very good and very user-friendly nowadays. The challenge is that the whole purpose of money in Bitcoin being that peer-to-peer, that sovereign ownership of I own my assets, I can do whatever I want with them, will slowly be eroded, and it will become normalized to have custodial relationship with the money that was designed to provide you that sovereign ownership of it. And the challenge, honestly, from there is that large organizations and countries could impose restrictions and other things that would completely shut off individuals from this system that was designed for the exact opposite reason to that. Logical dystopian future potential down the road there. All right, and the ugliest for last. The most dystopian or ugly thing that could happen from this is that it erodes the principles of what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. When we have these large institutions feeding billions and billions of dollars into this asset, they become significant stakeholders in this. And they have the ability to either actively or passively back, whether that's legislation or norms pushes, even such things as code updates. You could see a potential fork war, you could see potential regulation on Wall Street, DC, wherever, that's going to result in something that's different than the core ethics and values of what the Bitcoin community today finds valuable. And that will be slow, that'll creep in. But if you don't believe this is possible, just look at what has happened with ESG, which should have been a good concept over the years. Guess who pushed ESG mandates on companies? BlackRock. Guess who's the push for this most recent ETF resurgence? BlackRock. So if you think that this isn't possible, either overtly and deliberately or covertly or unanticipated, but it just creeps in, you've got another thing coming. So we need to stay true to what the Bitcoin community values are now, or a little bit used to be, and not let those norms and values erode over time and be more of corporatized, strictly focused on number go up technology or something even more perverse. We need to stay true to that. All right, that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is an extremely exciting time. The good is obviously extremely good. The bad is a challenge, and then we have to watch out for that ugly. Keep that in the back of your mind as we progress through these years of adoption increase. It's gonna be a wild ride. Let's not forget about these three categories. This is Matt Voke. See ya.